intimate gathering. You can hold a hand if you want. It won't bother me. And we can sing some hymns during my talk, so to make the time pass. I'll speak for 35 minutes, and then we'll make it an informal discussion for all of you. First, I'm speaking about the Obama Doctrine, obviously. The question is, how do I approach the subject? How do I examine critically the Obama Doctrine? There's more than one way to study it. One perspective, we can study the Obama Doctrine from the rhetoric of his own campaign. This is a man who ran for 2 years and made grandiose suggestions and declared his ambitions and made promises, most importantly. And we can assess the Obama Doctrine in practice on the basis of the promises he's made in the campaign. We can speak about his promises about the Iraq War. He spoke about through the language of peace. He spoke a lot through invocation of the language of peace. But his language was supposed to be very rhetorical and oratorical, which it seems to me is another way of saying he stayed at a very high literary level so as not to pin himself down with very specific aims. And in fact, when he was cornered, he was quite willing to shift and waffle and to change his positions. He promised to end the Iraq War. We can start with this premise. What did Obama do with the Iraq War? Has it been ended? Has his suggestions for ending it credible or not? The second point is, he said certain things in the campaign that do not reverberate today. Obama, we almost forgot, is somebody who said for the first time perhaps ever in American politics during the campaign, nobody has suffered more than the Palestinians. He said that. For an American presidential candidate to say that is quite unusual by the standards of American presidential politics. But after the various denunciations of his declaration about the Palestinians were made in the press and most importantly in Congress, he quickly changed his position on that subject, and he in fact was capable of producing a formula of that statement that became acceptable by supporters of Israel. And you remember the formula was, well, yes, the Palestinians nobody has suffered more than the Palestinians, but their suffering is at their own hands. So his formulation was, the Palestinians suffering, if it's true, it's only because the Palestinians made themselves suffer. So basically, you have to accept that the Palestinians are so much enamored with suffering that they inflict harm, they occupy themselves, they bomb themselves, all that because, they have a culture of suffering, I guess. He promised to close Guantanamo, and of course we know he did not. He lied about that. And he did speak the language of human rights, largely to criticize and attack the Bush administration. And we can evaluate how much he did with that. So this is one perspective of evaluating critically the Obama Doctrine. Another perspective or criterion would be from the perspective of the practices and rhetoric of his own administration. So we can say, let us discount or let us remember what he said in the campaign, but let us focus on the rhetoric and practices of his administration since he came to office. Because there's a clear distinction. It is quite unimaginable that Obama would ever declare as president that nobody has suffered more than the Palestinians, even with the amended formulation that he came up with to appease his Zionist friends. A third perspective would be, we can assess his doctrine from one's own goals and aims in the Middle East. I can evaluate his doctrine from the standpoint of what I think is important to happen in the Middle East if we are to achieve the goals that some people have. People have different multiple goals in the Middle East region. I happen to think that Israeli goal is continuation of war and occupation, in different names, of course. I mean, they have their own names, which I will touch on. I mean, continuation of foreign occupation is called peace process. While I call for, say, the restoration of Palestinian rights and the liberation of Palestine, but I call that real peace. So as you see, peace can be used to camouflage war, or peace can be used to declare a real concrete conditions of peace that can materialize if justice for the Palestinians can be restored in the Holy Land. A fourth criterion would be from the standpoint of comparison with the Bush Doctrine, like the extent to which the Obama Doctrine overlap or coincide with the Bush Doctrine. And I think this exercise is important because I would argue that Obama is not different in his doctrine as far as the Middle East is concerned, since I'm focusing on that, than the Bush administration. Let me say something about the campaign. What is characteristic of Obama's rhetoric on the campaign is that for some mysterious reasons, in the Middle East region and among Arab and Muslim Americans, there have been unjustified enthusiasm for Obama. I mean, throughout the campaign, I was writing about these things, in the Arabic newspaper that I write for, and I was wondering, why is there such excitement about Obama among Arabs and Muslims here and elsewhere? And my point was that there is no reason if you look at the policies themselves. I mean, it was unwarranted for Arabs and Muslims to be excited. But having said that, I think it's fair to say that Muslims and Arabs, especially in this country, have a long history of unwarranted excitement about presidential candidates. I mean, we know that Muslim organizations and well-known individuals, leaders of these organizations, were campaigning for George W. Bush at the first time he ran for office. And Professor Aryan, who wound up in jail for a long time, was one of the key chapter leaders for helping the Bush, to that extent, they don't make a difference to me. Professor Aryan was making an effort organizationally to help promote George W. Bush, among Muslim Americans in Florida and elsewhere. In fact, he had access to the campaign by virtue of his own efforts. So I say that there are many reasons for Muslim-Arab excitement about Obama. I mean, the first one is quite obvious. He's not Bush. I mean, if Mr. or Ms. Potato Head ran for office after the Bush administration, they would have been excited by everybody who didn't like Bush. And there's definitely an element of that in the case of Obama. The second reason is, I think, racism on the part of Arabs. I mean, I speak about the Arabs back home particularly, but that could also be true here. I think that Arabs, not unlike other people, are quite guilty of racism against blacks. And we do have an abysmal record in the treatment of blacks in our own midst. Sudan is one case. Saudi Arabia, the royal family has been holding African slaves, to this very day. To this very day. Some Muslim countries had to abolish slavery more than one time, like Mauritania, twice, Saudi Arabia, a few times. And part of the racism is the treatment of blacks as a monolith. So for many Arabs, Obama was Muhammad Ali. And as Obama was trying so hard here in America to distance himself from the middle name, in the Arabic press, unbeknownst to them, or perhaps wishful thinking, they would underline his middle name. In fact, you would see references in the Arabic press to Obama as Hussein Obama, as if to say that this is a proud Muslim. And sometimes he was treated as if he was a proud Muslim. And so element of that is naivete, element of that is all blacks are alike. And the most famous American black is Muhammad Ali, who was a Muslim. and he identified with Arab and Muslim people's struggles, especially on Palestine, and they thought he must be like Muhammad Ali. And they do not have a nuanced understanding of the distinctions within the African American community. The African American community is not a monolith. I mean, it's true on Democrat Republican, they are more leaning to Democrat. But on the other hand, on social issues, the African American community is quite complex. I mean, they support conservatives on a variety of issues, you see. So there was this excitement about Obama that I feel was unwarranted, and also led by the vague formulation of Obama. I mean, Obama was willing to speak in a language that, very much like Clinton, listeners of opposite perspective would feel he was speaking to them. I mean, Obama was making speeches simultaneously appeasing the pro-Israeli camp, and yet inexplicably allowing the Palestinians to think, especially in this country, that he was speaking about them, or speaking for them, or that he would be more fair to them than George W. Bush was. And of course, now you see increasingly there is realization that all this excitement was misplaced. Obama, on the other hand, I mean, typically also, like very much like Clinton, I was able to speak to the, desires of different camps. He was criticizing one Bush while praising another Bush. Remember that? When he was asked about his foreign policy preferences, he said he was a big fan of Bush-Baker team of the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. I mean, that's the same administration that gave us Madrid, which basically legitimized Israeli occupation and brought in Arab acceptance of Israel. And also that administration gave us the horrific war and the sanctions that were put on Iraq, resulting in the deaths of, we're not going to quibble with the figures, but let us agree, there were hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. Obama was also shifty in his positions. Whenever he's under attack, he was willing to change course, to change language, and he proved to be something quite obvious, a politician first and foremost, and not a principled believer in any set of beliefs about Palestine or anything else. Now, if you look at the rhetoric of Obama in office, you find that, in fact, in fairness to George W. Bush, his rhetoric was not different. I mean, there are certain differences for sure. Obama can write and speak English. And that was definitely a change. Obama's rhetoric can sometimes be poetic. Not on Israel, but on other issues, can be rather poetic. And he did write poetry, as you know. With Bush, if he finishes one sentence without making mistakes, that usually was an accomplishment. But if you assess Obama's rhetoric as far as the Middle East is concerned, it would be fair to say that it really did not contrast with the rhetoric of George W. Bush. I mean, he gave these general statements about Muslims, that Islam is not a bad, evil religion. But Bush said that. Bush said that. In fact, Bush was regularly saying these things as bombs were being dropped on Muslim heads in Iraq, Afghanistan, elsewhere. Same with Obama. So what's the difference? I mean, there probably is one difference. Bush made a point